Hello and welcome to Genealogy Gems podcast episode number 113. John Paul Godges is a professional magazine editor with a master's degree in journalism from University of California at Berkeley, and he set out to write a thoughtful, emotional, and comprehensive book filled with the stories of his family.
And just reading the stories of current events over the past 10 years, the stories of immigrants suffocating in freight cars in Iowa. This was just a few years ago.
Right.
There's hauntingly similar stories to what my great-grandfather experienced upon his arrival to this country. And so the more I learned about my family history, the more I realized that a lot of things have not changed all that much.
Mm-hmm. And I was just telling you before we turned the microphone on that it seems like nowadays I don't have much of a chance anymore to sit down and really read a good thick book. And so you sent me the review copy to take a look at this, and I started reading it and I couldn't put it down. And we're talking long chapters. I mean, this was a full, compelling story of this family. But I was just like, I can't put this down. I need to know what happened. What happened on the train and what happened here. Now, I don't want to spoil it for the people who I'm certainly hoping will go and check out your book. But I would like to know, because I get the sense you have not necessarily been a genealogist all your life. You're not a classic genealogist. So what led you to write a book about family history?
I needed to understand what the facts were about my grandparents.
From all these different varying stories you've been starting to hear. And did you have to learn the process of doing some of the research to confirm those facts?
Yes, I stumbled into it. I have a background in journalism, so I felt somewhat comfortable in searching for facts that I had no knowledge of before or where to find them. But simply in interviewing my family members and tracking the oral history, I found very early on that I had to double-check and triple-check every little detail, just because there are good-natured, well-intentioned slips of the tongue all the time. You are thinking of University of Memphis when you really need to say University of Nashville, for example. Makes a big difference. But I am the first one to make slips of the tongue like that all the time. So I needed to double-check every little historical detail, everything from the Summer of Love in 1967 to what was happening at the turn of the 20th century. So I found out about the Family History Library at the Mormon Temple here on Santa Monica Boulevard. And in double-checking the stories that my aunts and uncles and parents told me, I was scouring their microfiche rolls or microfilm rolls.
Yeah.
And it turns out that there were 6 ships involved in the 2 sides of the family coming to America. I was able to locate 5 of them the old-fashioned way at the Family History Library. And you know how painstaking a process that can be to be scrolling through these microfilms. You feel like you're on a ship yourself. It becomes rather nauseating.
That's a very good way to put it.
But I couldn't find the most important ship of all, the very first one of my Italian grandfather's arrival in this country. We never had any documentation of his arrival. We never had any proof. There was just a story that somehow had been passed down through oral history, even though he disappeared shortly after arrival in this country. We had no knowledge. All we had was a date of his death that had been written in pencil on a postcard and passed down from one generation to the next. Well, I had hit a wall, and fortunately, I was a tourist in New York City about 3 years ago, and I went to Ellis Island. By that time, the database that had been bankrolled by philanthropists, Lee Iacocca and several others, had made it possible to search for your ancestors not just by name of ship, which was this huge barrier, that you had to go through all of this rigmarole, cross-reference database to a sound decks and on and on and on to locate your people. Well, fortunately, they had updated the ship manifest records so that you could search by name and year, or even span of years. I was at the library there on Ellis Island, merely intending to confirm the 5 ships that I had found, because I had them fresh in my memory at that point. So just clacking away, stuck them in. It's like, okay, that was easy. And I thought, there's no way that I'm going to find the sixth one, because I couldn't find it, trying to employ any tricks at the Family History Center. But I just typed in the name in a span of 5 years, and up it popped. And it was my grandfather's name from a very small town in a hill town in central Italy, and he was, all of the ages and the family relationships and everything on that line were accurate. And I was then kicking myself, how come I had failed to find this before? And I was also asking myself, well, how did the story start? If he had disappeared, how did we hear it 3 and 4 generations later? The explanation of his disappearance. These were still mysteries, although I had this ship manifest in front of me. And then the light bulbs went on, because I saw that on each page of this digital passenger list, there were 39 or 40 pages, each with, 20 or 30 names. On each page of that particular ship manifest, the customs agent had forgotten to write the name of the ship. Oh. The top of the page of each of the page said SS blank. Oh. The ship name was there, the SS Patria, but the ship name was not. And so although this information, this historical data, had been in existence for 100 or so years, since 1902, it had been utterly inaccessible. You could not find it unless you were willing to somehow go through the entire history of millions of immigrants.
Just one, just thought that just got left off, and it didn't seem to make a difference at the time. It's amazing. Computer databases has just revolutionized the ability of people to get out and find. We were just talking about you don't have to be retired anymore because it's just sped up so much. And what a difference in the power of cranking through microfilm versus popping in a name and having the computer do the search for you. Pretty amazing. You must have just been doing what we call the genealogical happy dance.
I was. It brought tears to my eyes. Yeah. I went out there, and I was on the island, on Ellis Island. I was calling my sister on a cell phone, looking at New York across the Hudson River, imagining what my great-grandfather had been envisioning at the time when, right in the heart of Lower Manhattan was Little Italy at in its heyday, you could say, and imagining what he was going to go through and what he ultimately went through and how heart-wrenching that whole story was. But you were exactly right. And to think that I didn't even need to be at Ellis Island that day. I could have done
that. You could have been your jammies at home, right?
Right.
Pulling it up on the computer.
Right. And how much simpler it has become now to find that information. I guess I have to say that, I'm glad I went through the process in retrospect, simply so that I can fully appreciate now.
That's very true. Very well said. I suppose in 10, 20 years, they'll never have to do the kind of legwork that we did, and it will all seem so simple. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. There was the other mystery regarding how the story was passed down.
Oh, right.
And this was also double confirmation that this was the right person, the right man. It turns out that my great-grandfather had the same traveling companion.
Oh, yes, I remember that from the book.
As did my grandfather, who arrived 4 years later
to find him,
to search for my great-grandfather. The same man from the same little village who was 4 years older 4 years later. So he had served as the emissary, just as you said in the very beginning, returning to Italy and sharing the news, and then chaperoning the son to America.
Fantastic. Wow. And just seeing him, because he was such a pivotal player, not even a blood member of the family,
Correct.
But boy, he sure was part of your family history. Before I let you go, I really want to talk with you about